Welcome to demo. Yeah, you'll notice the successful is missing, isn't it? For all intents and purposes, this is meant as a successful demo video, and one of those episodes where I analyze the theoretical practical aspects of one module, blah blah blah. But unfortunately, this was anything but successful, as you'll see in a moment. Still though, the other components are present and we'll still go through them as per normal, but I won't count it as part of my successful demo series. This one was about Breach Dome, the new ambush from Crimson Dust. This was spoiled for quite some time and many people are raging over it when it was first spoiled because obviously it looks almost exactly like Shock. And yes indeed, it seems like it is intended as a rotation replacement for Shock. Unfortunately, its power level seems to be bumped up just a bit. In addition to dealing damage, it even trashes the top card of the stack, so it could be really nasty in sniping key cards from your stack as the runner without expecting it. Of course, it trades off the 2 trash costs of Shock, but it seems pretty powerful and pretty good trade-off to get the extra mill from the top of the stack, especially if you're intending on grinding out your opponent's stack. Speaking of grinding your opponent's stack, that's something that the Identity PU does, but you can imagine that they tweaked Breach Dome to deal meat damage instead of net damage for balance reasons. Even though Jinteki is the net damage faction, we can't have something that deals 1 net damage and trashes the top card of the stack in PU in addition to trashing yet another card of the stack. That's equivalent to 3 damage in PU. That's pretty nasty indeed. So yeah, that's the balance side of Breach Dome. Otherwise, it is basically identical to Shock, 0 to res, not that you ever res it, and 2 influence. The biggest problem with Breach Dome is not so much the milling or the synergy with PU or anything, it's the 1 month or so in which it coexists with Shock in the same card pool. And this, I think, exhibits very well the critical mass effect that can be detrimental to the metagame. Both of these cards are fine by themselves. If isolated in the card pool, you can include up to 3 copies of them, you know. They can be annoying to deal with, but they're not game breaking. However, when they do coexist in the same card pool, having 6 Shocks essentially available to you, it's really nasty, because that way you can start building up a very dangerous archives much more quickly than you could if only Shock or only Breach Dome is in the card pool by itself. And because of this, during this Crimson Dust metagame, while both cards are still legal, I'm going to try to build a deck that makes archives unrunnable as the objective and try to base a win con off of it. And in fact, I think you can imagine how this critical mass effect actually extends to other unpalatable aspects of the game as well, such as asset spam. Asset spam never used to be a thing. It was completely unviable. It was unheard of even in the core set days, and it continued for a few cycles after that. Asset spam first cropped up in NBN, where they started getting a critical mass of decent assets and the NEH ID to spam out. You're thinking of Daily Business Show, pack campaigns, Sands, it's an upgrade, but you can spam it like asset, team sponsorship, and so on. That gave them a critical mass of assets with which to play the spam game. And soon the other factions followed, catalyzed by the political assets. So, in a similar vein, I don't think asset spam is something that you can really suppress unless you delete a large portion of assets from the game, which is probably not going to happen. But that's a side tangent. What isn't tangential, however, are the political assets which I just mentioned. We are going to be playing some of that in our deck today. Obviously, we're playing it in IG because IG benefits the most from loading archives with Shocks and Breach Domes. Our objective is to quickly fill archives with these ambushes, and then start loading archives with face downs to make assets unpalatable to trash. At which point, we'll start mushing Ronins out and killing the runner because they cannot afford to trash said Ronins. So yep, that's basically the game plan of the deck. I do have a fast and a slow mode. You'll notice that I'm running Turtlebacks and Estelle Moon. That should give quick money and quick card draw so that I can find these cards that I need ASAP, find a combo, and then mushing them out. And hopefully kill the runner with a combo of Ronin and Neuro EMP before, the game goes too late, before they find a film critic. You'll notice that I'm running Clone Suffrage as my political asset instead of Bioethics, and really you should be running Bioethics. Why would you spend 2 influence on a CSM when Bioethics is worth 1? Well, the thing is, I want to play around with using Clone Suffrage to recur Mushin no Shin. This way, I can spam out lots of Mushin and Obokata, Mushin and Ronin, Mushin a Junebug, which I included there in case the runner decides to run every single advanced asset. So this should be interesting, and it also enables me to play G's Mounted Bioroids for free. Influence. So let's see how this deck works out. Judging by the fact that I called this demo instead of successful demo, I think you probably guessed the outcome. But let's see. Alright, so we're up against Wizard today. Remember, our win con is loading up archives with an unpalatable number of shocks and breach domes, and then putting out the assets that will let us win the game because they're untrashable. But with Wizard's 3 recurring credits, that's going to be pretty hard. So the first thing I'm going to do is to overdraw so that I can pitch shock into archives. Loading archives with shock is a good way to start the game, and my opponent actually plays very intelligently this game. Most people just tunnel vision into the game plan as the runner based on the deck they built, but my opponent very smartly preemptively runs archives here, takes the net damage. Luckily his iPad works, but doesn't matter. Either way, he's going to run my remote and trash it at the natural price. 4 credits for total backs, which kind of sucks, because next turn I wanted to play the Estelle Moon and 2 assets, so I get Turtle Back's money and Estelle Moon money and draw. Without that combo, my Estelle Moon will be slightly less effective, but I'm still going to pull it off anyway. But with the economy lead that my opponent has, they will be able to challenge my assets, which is going to be a big problem. We'll see what I can do about that for now. But for now, I really want to get the Estelle Moon draw going so that I can, start drawing to lots of cards and then loading up archives with more nasty stuff. But then I drew into a Kakugo on my mandatory draw, so I'm like, okay, now I have Ice, I can protect HQ, which has agendas, and then meanwhile load archives with an Obokata. Usually you load archives with shocks and breach domes, but Obokata is amazing for loading archives because they'll have to basically ditch the entire hand if they want to steal the Obokata, putting them at risk for a flatline kill. So now that I've stabilized with HQ protected and archives with loaded Obokata, I can now spam out. Estelle Moon goes on the table, Jackson goes on the table, Jeeves goes on the table. So this burst turn right here makes it very difficult for my opponent to contest my board, and boy, look at that, I just drew into 2 more shocks. Once I get into archives, my opponent's going to have a really, really hard time here. This is going to be amazing. So let's see what they do here. They do have a Temujin Director at R&D, which is big trouble for me. I would like to seal that up ASAP, but my opponent isn't running R&D 4 times. They don't really have the tempo to do that. A rich runner is actually the demise of my deck. If you know my deck inside out, all you need to do is to run every single Ronin and trash it. I can't really win. Thankfully, my opponent doesn't contest my board at all, so now I'm able to do some really fun stuff. I'm going to rest the Jeeves here, and I'm going to Jackson draw. I'm going to Jackson draw. I'm going to Jackson draw and trigger Jeeves, and this is a mistake. I'm drawing way too much with Jackson. I wanted to get the Jeeves efficiency there, but this was a big mistake. So I am thinning out my R&D, making it easier for me to deck myself, and I'm not really accomplishing much with the 6 cards that I just drew. Most of them are going into the bin, which seems like a good idea until you realize that your opponent can just run archives and get everything in one fell swoop. So this is my first big mistake of this game. I should not have tunnel vision into the Jeeves efficiency. Instead, I should have done something else with my 3rd click. And then just dump 4 cards in archive, 3 or 4 cards in archives. That would have been a good turn. Now there are too many cards in archives. There's no reason for my opponent not to run the bin. And that's going to cause me a lot of trouble because, sure, they'll take the tempo hit from running the bin here, but they get to flip every single card face up. It's going to be difficult for me to reload that archives again, especially since all the cards in my hand are cards that I want to keep. I need the Mamba Tempo for money, I need the Ronins for kill, I need a Mushin to enable the Ronins, and I need the Komainu on R&D. I need to stifle the Temujin. Meanwhile, my opponent finds a very good way to get passive money. They know they can't really afford spending clicks to take credit, so instead they're just going to drop a blue moose, which is going to give them very good money for the rest of the game. 3 recurring wizard credits, 2 recurring blue moose credits. That's 5 recurring credits to trash assets of their choosing. I'll need to load up these archives a lot more if I want these assets to stick, and they're definitely not sticking today. Yep, that total backs is going in the bin. Tough life. Yeah, so yeah, playing IG is so different from playing a normal deck, and I'm really, really bad at it. Yeah, which is kind of why I'm kind of reserved on playing Breach Dome. But anyway, I'm going to leave myself on 6 cards exactly in my hand so I can ditch the Breach Dome in the bin. Now I think I have 3 shocks and a Breach Dome in the bin, so that's a really unpalatable archives right there. Now, while there's some downtime, let's talk a bit about the standards IG decks. Now, most IG decks run the bioethics and hostile infrastructure combo, and honestly, that is way above the power curve in terms of what you can get, because right now I'm running a deck without bioethics and without hostiles, and I'm finding it very difficult to stick everything. If I had hostiles in my deck, this game would be so much easier, because that way, every time my opponent trashes something, they'll be taking a net damage, they'll be distracted into running the hostile infrastructures, and yeah, that would have been really good for my game. But instead, now I'm completely relying on my ID ability to protect my assets, which is rather vulnerable in the sense that with big money, and a lot of runners are running big money nowadays, it's very difficult to make those assets stick. So you need that net damage to take down your opponent's deck. So it seems like this game, I'll need to whittle down my opponent's deck in order to win, unless they make some sort of major error. And in such cases, you really want to have the drip damage of hostile infrastructure and bioethics, which is what I don't have. All I have is burst net damage in the form of Ronin and Neuro EMP. So on the same vein, or rather in the same vein, any sort of net damage prevention basically owns me. If my opponent is running Feedback Filter, Caldera, those sorts of cards, this deck cannot stand up against them. This is why you need hostile and bioethics, because yeah, they can threaten basically infinite damage. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. The more they try to trash, the more you get them back. They can only keep up the net damage prevention for so long. Now, I've loaded out archives for a fair amount, and I've ran out of patience, so I'm going to mush in this Ronin out. Let's see if my opponent dares contest this with only 3 cards in the hand. They triple draw, and indeed do run the Ronin. And this is not going to be cheap, but since they're wizards, since they're blue moods, it's not that expensive either. So unfortunately, I'm not able to fire that Ronin off. But now that I've loaded archives with my Mushin, because I Mushin the Ronin last turn, I can now play the CSM, Clone Suffrage Movement, and that should get my Ronin, my Mushin back, so I can Mushin my second Ronin out. That's the hope. But my opponent counters with a very nice Hacktivist Meeting, and this is why I run 3 Enforced Curfews in my deck. That with a deck that relies on its ID ability as its win con, as mine is, I need some way to turn off Employee Strike. So this is why I run Enforced Curfew, and this is why I chose CSM as my political asset. Even though it costs 1 more influence than bioethics, it allows me to recur Enforced Curfew, something that Jinteki doesn't normally have access to, recursion of currents. And this is very powerful, because if you're able to keep Employee Strike off the table, your assets will basically be untrashable as IG. And that is the hope. So, my opponent doesn't contest the CSM, so I was able to use CSM to recur Enforce Curfew, so I'm going to enforce the curfew, and then rest all my assets for good measure in case my opponent has another Hacktivist ready. Now, this is going to be very difficult for my opponent to deal with, because now that I have my assets res, they can't really contest it because they're so expensive, so they do decide to run archives, and they're going to be greeted by 1 Breach Dome and 3 Shocks. Thankfully, they do have a Plascrete. Very well played there to get the Plascrete out, but I do manage to snipe a lot of Hacktivists from the hand, I think. So sad. No, maybe not. But anyway, yeah, so I burned 1 Plascrete token, but I also dealt 3 net damage. So you can see that stack is running so low, so thin now. Looking at their board state, they don't have any programs installed, but make no mistake, they have access to all their programs, because all their programs are the Conspiracy Breakers, installable from the heap. And their main mode of burning me is with Parasite on the Street Peddler, with Cipher, which they have installed. This is why I did not rest any of my eyes on R&D. Even though I could afford to rest both, I knew that R&D was rather thin with agendas, because they're mostly in hand. I do not worry about my opponent accessing Obokatas at this point. Future Perfect was a big worry, and they did actually find a Future Perfect. So now they are 1 agenda away from winning, which is unfortunate. But that also means that the number of stealable agendas are very low. So the agenda suite is another really nasty thing about this IG deck. And unfortunately, it's not going to make a turn for the better post-rotation. All you need to do is run 3 Obokatas and 3 Future Perfects. That's 6 agendas, 18 agenda points, and all of them are very hard to steal. Your last 2 points can be anything. It could be Philotic, which is usually preferred, or in this case, because I'm not planning to score at all, I just run the one-off Fetal in my hand. So, of this 7 agenda suite, 2 are in my opponent's score area, 2 are in my hand, and 3 are in the deck. Actually, I'm not sure if my bin has Obo Carters. There might be. I don't think so. But anyway, they do have enough cards in hand to steal Obo Carters right now, so I'm hoping my opponent misses here. And they sure do. Thankfully, they are not going to be able to find the Obo Carter they need to win the game. So at this point, they ignored the run-in that I mushed in on the table in favor of running R&D, which was actually the right call. R&D was likely to give way there, but I luckily survived this turn. So counting my opponent's hit points, they have 1 card left in stack, 4 in the hand. This is the time to fire off chip damage run-in. Even though it doesn't kill my opponent, it basically stifles my opponent's options. They cannot win off Obo Carters now. Both my Obo Carters are completely safe. The only agendas they can steal are the 2 future perfects, 1 in hand, 1 R&D, and the Fetal AI, which is in my hand. So with only 1 stealable agenda in R&D and having to win a side game to steal it, I felt comfortable with my opponent running through the Komainu. And letting them get a whole bunch of medium counters. At this point, they're digging through half my deck. But chances are they're not going to win. In fact, they've probably seen 1 or even both Obo Carters in deck by this point, but they can't steal it. And this is why grindy Jinteki is just nasty. It encourages you to drag out the games as such. And at this point, I'm considering my win cons. With a top deck Neuro, I couldn't get any more lucky than this. This was a huge Neuro EMP for a very big reason. It closes off yet another win con for my opponent. If they hit the Fetal AI in my hand, they immediately lose. They cannot steal it, and the net damage will flatline them. So the only way my opponent is going to win is with future perfects. 1 in deck, 1 in HQ, and they have to win the side game on top of it. This is an absolutely obnoxiously oppressive agenda suite. And I'm going to take advantage of this and try to bait my opponent into running that Fetal AI. They haven't seen it yet. They don't know there's a Fetal in the deck. I hope that I can induce them to running this remote now that they're so desperate. With medium purge, hopefully they'll run into it. With all the net damage dealt, they couldn't fully effectively utilize the Parasipher combo because most of the parasites ended up being sniped into the bin. They only managed to parasite my Kakugo and R&D, I think. That was about it. Their Deja Vu is now in the bin, their parasites are gone, and the last card in their hand is probably worthless. However, how am I supposed to win? I need to proactively deal net damage. So I need to start finding those run-ins, I need to start finding those Neuro EMPs, and get them before they find my future perfects. This is a race. And let's see if I can pull off the race. I find the Mushin, but I need to find the run-in to go with it. No run-in. That's tough. Okay, what do I do here? R&D is kind of porous at this point. I could put Aiki on R&D, but I really want to induce them into running this Fetal AI. So I'm going to bluff it. I'm going to pretend it's a run-in and hope that they go trash it. Hope that they dare to face check the ice. Hope that they trash this totally run-in that is not actually a run-in. But instead, they go for R&D instead. And I'm like, this is very curious. Surely you need to go trash the run-in. Otherwise, it will kill you. And there probably are no agendas in R&D. Speaking of agendas in R&D, my opponent is super tunnel into R&D. If they had ran HQ at any point before, they were probably in a good place. Now, not so much, because the HQ Ice is a Kakugo, and they cannot afford to take net damage from Kakugo. So, knowing that HQ is safe due to Kakugo, all I need to do is to short R&D now, because that's the only place where I lose. So, both Aikis go on R&D. It's going to be pretty taxing, but my opponent can still get through it, so they just click for credits on their turn. I'm also going to click for, purge medium first. I need some credits and then I'm going to play friends. Now I'm looking at my bin and I'm wondering why I should friends when I realize that all 3 run-ins were in my bin. So that's why my opponent didn't run my advanced remote. That was so obviously a trap because there were no run-ins left. I don't have a 4th run-in. This was dumb. Another stupid play by me. I should check the number of run-ins left in my deck before actually trying to bluff my opponent with this is a run-in. So massive fail there from me. That Fetal is useless now. Note that I'm not scoring the Fetal because my win con is not scoring agendas. My win con is net damage. My opponent is so close to flatlining, all I need to do is to get 1 running off to win. So I use Jackson to shuffle back 2 run-ins and a Neuro EMP. My hope is that with the medium purge and the double Aiki into Komainu on R&D, it can slow down my opponent enough for me to dig through my deck to find the Ronins that I need to Mushin out. I do have the Mushin, I just need to find the Ronin. And yeah, my opponent tries to get through R&D. Let's see if they find the winning agenda. Do they find it? Do they find it? I guess not. Alright, I find Estelle Moon. So yeah, hostile infrastructure is another... again, this is where hostile infrastructure would have been great, right? Because with hostile, I would be able to mush in the Ronin out safely. If they trash the Ronin, they'll have to take net damage. Unfortunately, I don't have that, so now I'm just looking for either Neuro EMP. If I can't find it, I'm just going to mush in the Ronin out next turn. But again, I have to worry about my opponent trashing the Ronin, and this is why I need hostile in my deck. See? Too many cards you want in your deck, not enough deck space, and... ooh! They hit a Breach Dome. Not very useful though, because my opponent has meat damage protection. So I draw a Elbow Cutter here. They know I've just drawn it. Yeah, I'm gonna Mushin out the Ronin. They have 2 credits. They start the turn with 2 credits, but Blue Moose gets them 4 credits. They are able to run it and then trash the Ronin. I can't kill them. I built a deck that tries to kill the opponent, but can't kill them. This is dumb. My deck is so bad. I'm in trouble. What to do here? What do I do here? Okay, it's quite awkward. I have the last Jackson in my hand. I'm gonna pitch all the agendas in the bin at this point, and this just shows you another reason why this agenda suite combined with Shocks and Breach Domes is just so dumb. Oboe Carter is unstealable from the bin because my opponent doesn't have enough, doesn't have 4 cards in hand, and they could try to steal the Future Perfect, but if they lose the side game, they will die to Shocks. So the safest place for me to put my agendas now is actually Archives. This is dumb. This is just stupid. My opponent can't really win because as soon as I draw an agenda, it's going in the bin where they can't run. And this is, yeah. And now they're just futilely running R&D. There are no agendas left in there that they can steal. I draw a Neuro EMP, and yes, I completely deck myself. My opponent has tunneled themselves into R&D too much but couldn't find the winning Future Perfect. And now... they can't do anything. They just have to wait to lose. At this point, I could lose with the Future Perfect in R&D, so I'm going to rest the Kokuro on HQ to keep them out. They can't run R&D because there's nothing in R&D, so they just take a few credits while I reshuffle back Neuro for the win. That was such a grindy game. Yeah, I really hate grindy games like this where the party that is grinding out is just waiting for the correct card to appear. And this is why I didn't play Bioethics and Hostile in this particular IG deck. As a matter of principle, you know, I didn't want to put myself in a game state whereby my best option was to doodle out the game and to friends Bioethics and Hostiles and just sit there waiting for my opponent to bleed their entire deck. Ironically enough, that ended up backfiring because without those very cards that are so effective at dealing net damage, I was forced in a situation where I had to wait for the correct kill cards to appear on top of R&D. The timely arrival of Neuro EMP, drawing the Ronin through R&D lock. And that just took so long. It was ridiculous. So yeah, either way, it doesn't promote good gameplay. As long as I'm not trying to score my agendas, whether I'm playing Bioethics Hostile combo or not, it's going to be oppressive because I'm not trying to advance my game state. I'm simply waiting for the correct kill cards to appear, and that's boring. That said, I definitely could have sped up this game with a combination of a better deck and also better gameplay. I made so many mistakes this game that I would be ashamed to call this a successful demo episode. You saw that I drew too many cards on the turn that I had G's and Jackson up, but one thing I didn't mention was that when I Mushin out a Ronin, I failed to take into consideration that my bin had very few face down cards. My opponent was able to trivially trash my Mushin Ronin and put me that much further from flatlining them. I should always, you know, as a rule of thumb, keep 3 to 4 face down cards in the bin before even thinking of Mushining out a Ronin against Wizard because, yeah, at least force them to run the bin, if not pay, you know, go broke trashing my Ronin. But by not doing that, I'm just dragging out the game by making it, by making me rely more on my Jackson and preemptive recursion and maybe clone suffrage recursion so that I can get more net damage back on board. Finally, I was very dumb in the sense that I don't like playing in the late game, and that clearly shows when during the late game I tried to bluff cards that couldn't have been there because all the cards were in the bin. You're trying to bluff a Ronin when you're 3 Ronins in the bin. Trying to save a Neuro EMP for recursion with CSM when all my CSMs were gone. You know, these are very stupid mistakes that I shouldn't be making. And all in all, that contributed to the very long dragged out game. So this is one of those games where even though I technically won the game, I didn't feel like this was a victory at all. The only silver lining here is that I've now showcased Breach Dome. I'm more than happy to get over this dumb card. It's not a dumb card by itself, but in conjunction with Shock, it creates the critical mass effect that I explained earlier, and that's why I don't like. Well, that's all I have. Thanks for watching, and I hope this wasn't too painful to watch. I'm sorry if it was. We'll be back with a better video next time, I promise. See you then. Bye.